Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be interviewing Right Worshipful Brother Alan Akehurst.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our usual group of hosts. We have Brother Craig Graham from Kalamalka Lodge number 160 in Vernon, British Columbia. Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth from King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. Very Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung, who's a member of Prince Charles Lodge up in Kelowna, BC. I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek number 243. We meet in lovely Montlake Terrace, Washington. And today we're sort of skipping ahead. We had finished up chapter 7, and we're going to sort of jump ahead to chapter 10 about the York Rite bodies, because we were able to I don't know what the word is, harangue, to grab Right Worshipful Brother Alan to ask him to be on the show today. So Right Worshipful Brother Alan is, in addition to being Steve and Craig's district deputy at the moment, is the he's a member. Actually, he's a member of your lodge, Steve. Is that right? He's a member. And he's a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason, but what we're talking to him about today is the York Rite. He's been Grand Chaplain for all the York Rite bodies in Canada, I believe, or in BC rather, and his has been I messed it all up, didn't I? I almost got there.
You're doing good. I'll just cut this part out.
All right. I'll start over with the introducing Right Brother Alan. So Right Worshipful Brother Alan, in addition to being the Craig and Steve's district deputy and a member of Steve's Lodge, has also been the Grand Chaplain of all the Grand York Rite bodies in the BC area and sort of Western Canada area. And he's a Knight of the York Rite Cross of Honor and has been honored as the Knight Commander of the Temple by the Supreme Council. And we're just tickled to have him here and to talk about York Rite, which is an area. I'm a Scottish Rite Mason. I've never joined York Rite, although actually I'm considering going, but I haven't done it yet. And so it's something I would be happy to learn more about. So I guess most importantly, Right Worshipful Sir, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast.
Thank you.
And I guess on a broad scale, at the 30,000 foot level, what is York Rite Masonry? What is it all about?
I think York Rite Masonry, as its name suggests, is English-based, obviously from the city of York, where the history will go back, I think into before the 10th century with operative Masons. So it has that history. It consists of 4 major bodies plus a whole raft of invitational bodies. The basic bodies are the Craft Lodge, the Royal Arch Chapter, and to go any further in the York Rite, you must be a Royal Arch Mason. And then you can join Preceptory, which is the Knights Templar, which is governed by the Sovereign Great Priory of Canada. So it's a national body. Then there's the Cryptic Rite of Western Canada, Royal and Select Masters. So those are the 4 basic bodies. I think I hit 4.
That's incredible. And you've been part of all of those. How long have you been part of all those?
I joined the Royal Arch in 1978,
Wow.
the year after I joined the craft.
So again, so coming at it from a Scottish Rite Mason perspective, in the Valley of Everett, there where I belong, there are 3 bodies as part of that, but they're sort of, I don't know what the word is. They move together as one in the Valley of Everett. My impression of York Rite Masonry, again from the outside, is that the bodies are sort of more separated. Is that correct?
The simplest way to describe it from a Scottish Rite perspective is that the chapter of Royal Arch Masons would be equivalent to the Lodge of Perfection. You can't go anywhere without that, right? In the days when you had to be either a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason or a Knight Templar, then the the preceptory, the Sovereign Great Priority preceptory, would follow from the Royal Arch. Cryptic sort of sits off to the side, but they're not. You're not doing degrees like 4 to 32 as you do in Scottish Rite. They are separate bodies.
So I was under the impression that you had, once you became a Royal Arch Mason, then you had to move into the next body before you could be going to Knights Templar. And that is what you're saying, what I'm hearing anyway, is that it's not the case. Once you're a Royal Arch, you could, in theory, go to either one first?
Yeah, you can go to either one. The normal progression is to preceptory, but you can go to cryptic if you want.
Interesting. I didn't realize
And
that.
sorry,
Alan, how many degrees roughly are you working as you go through? Like, is it 3 or 4 in the Royal Arch, and then another 3 or 4 in the cryptic? And again,
Okay, in Canada, there are only 3 degrees in the Royal Arch. They are the Mark Master, the Most Excellent Master, and the Royal Arch Mason. We do not do, with the exception of Columbia number 1, we do not do the virtual Past Master. That's an American thing. So in the preceptory, or we call them orders, not degrees. So there's the Order of the Red Cross, there's the orders, the Order of Malta, and the Order of the Temple. In cryptic rite, there are 3 degrees: the Royal Master, the Select Master. The Select Master is the degree in which they do the work, and then the Super Excellent Master.
and are all those degrees work like they are in craft masonry? Like you take them individually, and then you're examined on them at some point afterwards?
Well, the ritual for Royal Arch says that there's an examination, but I've been in Royal Arch now for 46 years. A friend of mine's been in more than 50, and he's never seen the requirement to actually prove up. It's in the ritual, but I've never seen it done.
Sounds like the kind of school I'd want to attend.
Yeah. And it's definitely nothing like what we call the ancient work in Canada.
Okay.
In the book, he talks about the 3 + 1 = 3, and he's referring to when the Grand Lodge of England was formed. United Grand Lodge of England was formed. They, of course, had several disagreements, and the outcome was as confusing as its wording. It says, in that there'll be basically the first 3 degrees are the only ones that will be worked, except and including the Order of the Royal Arch.
The wording is there are but 3 degrees in Freemasonry, including the Holy Royal Arch.
Right.
Right. That goes back to the time of the union of the two Grand Lodges in England to form the United Grand Lodge, and they were called the Ancients and the Moderns. And I never remember which one was most active with the Holy Royal Arch degree. But there was some crossover between them. But that was one of the terms of union, was that the Holy Royal Arch would be continued. Yeah.
And is it because it's not practiced in Blue Lodge, but it was approved as a degree, ancillary degree, essentially by the Grand Lodges? And so isn't the theory that if you're going to be a chartered Grand Lodge from the Grand Lodge of England, that you have to recognize at least that Mark Master degree in addition to your first 3 degrees? And so by default, every Grand Lodge recognizes, I'm doing heavy quotes here, recognizes the Royal Arch or York Rite through the Royal Arch degree, essentially.
Yeah. Originally, the Royal Arch chapters were connected directly to a craft lodge. That is no longer the case. It hasn't been for quite some time. In England, the system is different. In England, there is a Mark Master Masons Grand Lodge on its own, and there is a Grand Chapter of the Holy Royal Arch on its own. There is no grand body for the Most Excellent Master degree. I'm not quite sure how it fits in, although I've heard that it's connected to the cryptic rite in England, but I'm not certain about that. That in BC, we've made a great point about the fact that we can wear the Royal Arch jewel on our lapel in Craft Lodge because of that English tradition. But it's my understanding that in recent years, and I couldn't tell you when, the United Grand Lodge of England and the Grand Chapter of Royal Arch Masons in England have, in effect, repudiated the phrase, there are but 3 degrees in Masonry, including the Holy Royal Arch. They're now, as I understand it, completely separate. However, I'm no expert, so.
Yeah, I remember seeing something about that and talking to someone in England about that, because I visited a lodge in England many years ago. And at that time, a lodge would essentially have a Royal Arch chapter attached to it, in the sense that its warrant number was the same as the Craft Lodge.
Oh, interesting.
And often shared the name as well. And when you look on the website of the United Grand Lodge of England, and you look at the provincial Grand Lodges that are, like your Metropolitan Grand Lodge of London or your, Provincial Grand Lodge of Northampton, it will often on the website have a direct link to the Royal Arch component as well, to the point where some of the lodge, some of the listings of the lodge will be asterisks where those lodges have Royal Arch chapters attached to them. And it's quite interesting, because it'll be many of the same members of the lodge, in fact, oftentimes holding officers' positions in both bodies at the same time.
Yes, I was the I was the first principal of Kelowna chapter. The year before, I was the virtual master of St. George's Lodge in Kelowna. So, yeah, they kind of go together. In my case, I didn't get to preceptory because it met on a Wednesday night, and for me, that was a work night. So I joined Scottish Rite instead. Then when I retired, I could do all the other.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting about the name. That makes sense, Greg. I had never heard that. And in our area, in our lodge, we have a King Solomon Council, but not a King Solomon chapter or a large chapter. It's named after one of our first members. I don't know. Anyway, it's named after a member, not after the lodge.
In the cryptic rite in Canada, and I don't know if this applies in the US, we have what is called a Royal Ark Mariner Lodge. And the terminology is they are moored to a council.
Ark, that's where
So
the ark comes in.
the council that I belong to in Kamloops has a Royal Ark Mariner Lodge moored to it. And the officers of the Mariner Lodge are the previous year's officers from the council. They just move ahead 1 year, right?
So if we want to go back to the English example for a moment there, we talked about the Grand Lodge of the Mark Master Masons.
Mm-hmm.
So that relationship between the Mark and the Royal Ark, that exists in England in the same way that the Craft Lodge and the Royal Arch is maintained. A Mark Lodge will have a Royal Ark Lodge moored to it, and oftentimes the officers are, and in England, a lot of those bodies only meet 4 or 5 times a year. So you'll have alternating months where it's a Mark Lodge meeting, and then the next month it's a Royal Ark meeting. It's quite interesting way they do it over there. And I noticed that when we talk about the cryptic rite for a second, there is one interesting example in the United States, in 2 of the states, Virginia and West Virginia, where the Royal Arch jurisdiction covers all the degrees from Mark Master, Virtual Past Master, all of the cryptic degrees, and then the final degree in those states is the Royal Arch Masons degree. So there is a bit of a difference in U.S. practice from state to state.
Yeah. There's not in Canada that kind of a difference.
No.
They're pretty much, to the best of my knowledge, all the jurisdictions are the same in Canada. In terms of when I say they're all the same, I don't mean that they're necessarily the same territory, because the Grand Chapter usually has the same territory as the Grand Lodge. And then the Sovereignty Priory is national. There's just one body, right? As it is with Scottish Rite. And then the cryptic rite, I think, is divided into, I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3, but the one that I'm involved in is Western Canada. So it's BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. I think there's so then there'll be Ontario, and then I think Quebec is separate. And then I think the Maritimes are separate, but I can't swear to that because I don't really know.
I'm curious. You're talking about differences in jurisdictions. You had mentioned earlier that the virtual past master degree was an American thing, and that only one of a group in your area does it. Does the just from the name, is virtual past master mean did at some point one have to be a past master in order to join, and this is essentially saying poof, you're a past master, or is it something other than that?
Yeah. So originally, to be a Royal Arch Mason, you had to have been a worshipful master in the chair. Because that was a requirement, they came up with this thing called the virtual past master. Now, the reason it applies only in one chapter in BC is because that chapter was, what's the word I'm looking for? Chartered by the Grand Lodge of Scotland. And they did the virtual past master, but they got rid of it. And not only did they get rid of it, they got rid of their rituals and they lost them. And they managed to find part of one in Australia. But the Columbia #1 chapter in Victoria has always done the past master, so they have it. And they actually gave it back to the Grand chapter of Scotland. And the fellow that was responsible for that, Brother Norm McAvoy, was invited to Scotland at their expense to return the ritual to them. But it goes back to the history of the Royal Arch degree. And it goes way back into operative masonry. Because in the original operative masonry, the person in charge of a lodge was not the master. It was the wardens. And the master came to them because he was in effect the architect and overseer. So he would come, and I'm then trying to think what the other title we'd use for somebody in construction that sets out what they want done, but doesn't hang around to see if they're doing it.
Wouldn't that be the architect?
Well, it would be more than the architect, but because he actually, I guess he lays out the work. So that's where the language in the ritual in the craft comes from, about the master sets the employees to work, sets out the plan, and then it's up to the lodge to carry it out. The lodge basically was fellow crafts. They were the people who did the work and traveled and oversaw the apprentices. The master came when he had some specific instruction to provide. But
So
speculative masonry hasn't been there for a long time with that.
So if they make him a virtual past master, do they give him the word of a master?
Oh yeah, I was made a virtual past master in Omak, Washington, and I sat there and went, "What?" They're giving the secrets of the worshipful master's chair to people who've never sat in the chair.
Interesting.
And I thought, ooh, okay. So I was somewhat surprised when I saw that. I have not, I was scheduled to do the virtual past master in Columbia #1, but I ended up getting sick and didn't get there. So
I'm surprised that's never been challenged or anything like that. That's interesting.
That's what they do. I don't speak to how other people do things.
You guys do have some pretty cool diagrams and whatnot in New York, right? That's for sure. Looking at the book, there's some cool diagrams.
So remind me what the diagrams are.
The symbol of the cryptic masonry and the symbol of the Knights Templar. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always been
The Knights
fascinated.
Templar, as it is in the U.S., is very military. Just a minute. The proper title, if I can see it here. The proper title of the thing is the Sovereign Great Priory of Canada of the United Religious and Military Orders of St. John of Jerusalem, Palestine, Rhodes, and Malta, and of the Temple. And if you think that's a mouthful, you want to try the Holy Royal Arch Knight Templar Priests and Order of Holy Wisdom, which is one of the in invitational orders in the York Rite.
We could certainly use some holy wisdom around here. So you mentioned the commandery there for a second, or the Knights Templar. That's, again, haven't done it, but that is my understanding is the to be a Knight Templar, you have to take a vow to defend the Christian faith. Is that a part of?
Yes, it's a Christian order. Yes.
So it is a Christian order. Okay,
yes. Cryptic Rite is not. Neither is the Royal Arch. They are the same as Craft Lodge.
Interesting. So does what? Not to be picky, but must one be a Christian, or must one really be willing to say, I approve of Christianity?
You must be willing to attest to the belief in the holy and undivided Trinity.
Interesting. All right.
And my understanding, and I'm not 100% certain of this, but I've seen the two charts of the ladders of the orders in the US and in the UK, and in Canada and the US, the Scottish Rite is considered to be non-Christian. But if you look at the chart for the order in the UK, it's called Christian. And this has always been one of my bugbears with the Scottish Rite saying it's not Christian, is the 18th degree in Scottish Rite includes a requirement to attend on Maundy, Thursday, and on Sunday, Easter Sunday. Neither of those requirements exist in any of the Christian orders to which I belong. They're in the Scottish Rite only that I know of. And they claim not to be Christian. So I can't think of more important Christian feasts than those two. Unless Christmas, what you want to call Christmas.
Interesting.
I was gonna save the great Christian debate until the next segment, Matt. But but since we opened that can of worms, I thought that. So to clarify, you had said that you have to believe in the Trinity.
Yes.
But I also thought more so that it was that you would simply, as you said originally, that you would just simply be willing to defend the Christian faith.
No, one of the things that in the closing is listen to the precepts of the order. And those words are love, honor, and fear God, maintain and defend the Christian faith and the interests and the honor, dignity, and interests of the order. So that's where it comes in, but it's not, in Craft Lodge, you have to say that you believe in the Supreme Being. You have to do that before you even can apply, right?
Right.
You can put your petition in. In the preceptory, Knights Templar, it's the same thing. You have to say that you profess a belief in the Trinity to get in, but not to maintain and defend the faith. That comes as part of the ritual.
So, regardless, any Mason, well, I'd have to think about that for a little while. Wouldn't any Mason, regardless of their faith, believe in a Trinity?
No,
maybe not.
So in Prince Charles Lodge, we have a Muslim. It's not Trinitarian. Only Christians are Trinitarian. Jews are not. Muslims are not.
I know we had in the book somewhere earlier, didn't we, though, had this conversation that there was something about there was a Jew that was a Scottish, that was a York Rite Mason, and they said, how could you be Jewish and be a York Rite Mason? And he said, well, I would believe that any of my brothers would defend my faith, such as I would defend their faith in Christianity. And so the idea of defense of belief being the ultimate obligation or requirement. So, but now I'm hearing a little bit different scenario, and I apologize, I can't remember.
See, that may be a difference between Canada and the US or Canada and the UK. I don't know the answer to that.
Gotcha.
I just know that in Canada, that's the requirement.
Or maybe it's only for that last degree, of that last set of degrees then. Maybe I was thinking they were talking about being a commander, something high up in York Rite, but maybe I apologize now, everyone, to you and everybody else listening, that I don't remember where that came from, but I do remember thinking when we're going to get to York Rite, we're going to talk to this people and say, what's the deal? I thought that you had to be 100% Christian only. And when they said there was a Jewish guy that was a York Rite Mason, I thought, how's that possible? And he said, well, yeah, you just have to defend the faith.
Well, we once had a Buddhist, and he was prepared to believe in the Trinity. So, okay, we took him in. They've changed the language of the requirement now for Sovereign Great Priory in that you must be a Christian. It's not just enough to say, I believe in the Trinity, but I am a Christian.
Both
it's
in
a Christian order.
I would assume, Ellen, in both profession and perhaps baptism as well. Would that be the requirement?
There's not a requirement for baptism.
Okay.
It's just profession.
It's profession. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I guess I'm used to most Masonic bodies being less specific in their religious ideology. That's interesting that this one is. Speaking of York Rite bodies, I know that there are a bunch of other ones, but I also know that we're about running into the end of our time for this episode. So, Right Worshipful Sir, if you're willing to come with us for another episode next time, or can you hang on for a little bit and talk?
I can do that.
All right. Well, on behalf of me and Stephen and David and Craig, thank you, Alan Akehurst, for being a part of our show today. And we thank you all for listening to the Working Tools podcast. We will be talking to Right Worshipful Brother Alan here on the next episode of the Working Tools podcast. Goodbye.